This is going to be an interesting one because Rich is going to join us. He'll be with us shortly, and we just wanted to obviously have a little bit of a conversation to begin with. I think there's a really good question that's in the chat that kind of brings us into this conversation. The reason being is because obviously Palace against Newcastle United. There's been a lot of Palace Newcastle United conversations going on the last few months, particularly around the potential signing in the summer of Marc Guehi. Now, we tried to get a word from a certain individual about his thoughts on this Marc Guehi saga. He'd message me privately, but he wouldn't share anything. He wouldn't come onto the channel because he was too busy. However, Tom Dixon asked the question, how much would you sell Marc Guehi for if Newcastle came back in for him in January? Well, we asked him, and we asked D. D, unfortunately, couldn't make the show live tonight because he's working, but we asked him the question about Marc Guehi. So here's D's response to this.
What did he say? Let's see.
What's going on, people? It is D here from Back of the Nest for a Guehi talk. For the Guehi talk. Marc Guehi over the summer linked to Newcastle, once again being linked with another move to Newcastle in the January transfer window. I'm going to be giving you my perspective as a Palace fan. It's not going to be long because my opinion based on how Palace operate doesn't change based on these stories. Look, the contract situation with Marc Guehi not having that long left is a concern for Palace. He hasn't signed an extension. We saw it over the summer. Those were the conversations. He hasn't signed an extension. Would Palace be banking on selling Guehi? It didn't work out. You might have your own perspectives as a Newcastle fan, but as a Palace fan, we had our valuation. We didn't want to sell him. Newcastle didn't meet it, and we moved on. We're not in desperate need to sell him. However, as January is approaching and he still hasn't signed another extension, of course, there's going to be rumors once again. Could Guehi go to Newcastle? In my honest opinion, I don't see Guehi really going to any club in January unless very, very good money is offered. We're looking to strengthen. We're struggling right now in the Premier League as it is. And we're looking to add more pieces to try and get more wins. If we were to sell Guehi and then afterwards bring in a few other players, that doesn't mean we're really strengthening, because then we're going to have to focus on the defense as well, which the defense might go weaker without Guehi because he's a very good player. So I don't think Guehi will leave this January window. I think there is a possibility over in the summer, especially if he doesn't sign an extension. And yeah, I think he's been very good for us. It does make a lot of sense for Newcastle to go after him because I think he can bridge the gap, baby steps to fight with those elite clubs at the top. And I think he's a great player to do so. He's an England international, a regular starter. And yeah, but in all honesty, I'm sorry, but I just don't see Guehi leaving Palace in January window unless something crazy is offered around £60 million, which with contract situation, maybe Palace needs to seriously consider that, but around 40 to 50, I don't think so. But let's see. Crazy things have happened. But thank you for having me on the channel and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Interesting.
Yeah, very.
Boys, what are your thoughts on that? We wanted to ask him the question around Marc Guehi, and I'm sure we'll ask Rich the same question when he joins us shortly. So, yeah, what are your initial thoughts to that?
Well, we all know that Marc Guehi is a generational talent. I think that's what he's referred to. No, I like Marc Guehi. I think we should still sign him. Not for the 60 million that D is alluding to there, but I think for me, because his contract situation, he's 24, 25 in July, 45, 50 million, take it or leave it, but offer it at the before the start of January or at the start of when the window opens. And if it's there's no backing over, waiting the whole window for this, do the deal, or we move on. And then Palace are within their rights to say no, and that's it. We move on. That's my thoughts. But I'd go after him and I'd bring him in. I think he would be class for us.
What do you think, Chris? Are you the same as Dad? And is it still a priority signing for you in this window?
Not necessarily in this window. I think for me, the priority signing in this window has to be a right winger. For me, it just has to be in those attacking areas, particularly because we're struggling so much in terms of scoring goals. However, I like what Daz said, in terms of going to Palace with a figure and saying, right, okay, here's the offer. You've got until X date. If the answer's no, fine, but we move on and it doesn't drag on for the whole 31 days of January. We don't want that. I thought D's valuation was interesting, but do you know what? It's funny. I was quite shocked when I was listening to D, because D talks a lot of sense, but that was the most calm I think I've ever seen D, and it was unusual. But he come across really well. Felt it was a really good video, but I get where D's coming from in terms of from a Palace perspective. You don't particularly want to lose your captain, very good centre back. And you obviously want to get top dollar for them, so I completely get that. But particularly after Eddie Howe's comments, when he was asked about Marc Guéhi and figures were bandied around, and he very much said, didn't he? Oh, didn't get to that figure. So to me, I'm assuming that Newcastle may have made an offer. I could be wrong. Maybe made an offer of 55, possibly 60 million. Maybe, I don't know. And I think that will have significantly reduced now. So if we were to go in with an offer, I think like Daz said, you're probably talking 45, 50 million. Will Palace accept that? And I do take D's point that, would it make sense for Palace to lose, the captain, centre-back, and then bring in two players? Because yes, you could argue they've strengthened because they've got an extra player, but they would have significantly, weakened the squad as well. You could argue, losing your captain, losing that really big player for them. So, it's an interesting one. I think overall, to summarise, I think for me the priority is right wing. However, that's not me saying I don't want Marc Guehi, but perhaps it is, like Dia suggested, it is something that we revisit in the summer. And again, I think the price will drop even further then, because by then we'll know whether Marc Guehi is going to sign a contract extension. Because I think if it gets to next summer and he's only got a year left, I think Palace will reluctantly let him go rather than lose him for nothing in 12 months down the line. But yeah, interesting. For me, I wouldn't go above 45, 50 million. 50 million is the top ceiling, in my opinion. But if you were to tell me that we've only got 50 million to spend, I would be spending it elsewhere personally. But what about you, Pete? What did you think?
For me, it's still a priority position. I also agree with you that a right wing needs to be signed as well. But my thoughts on January. I think we need to sign in both areas, ideally. Yeah. However, I do think it's a priority position. If there's a deal to be done with Marc Guehi, I'd certainly be going back there. Obviously, he doesn't think it will happen in January, but I have to say he has kind of loosened his stance on that, where he was adamant he wasn't leaving at all in the summer. He was saying if there's money there and a potential deal to be done, then it may well be something that can be done. I think it can be done if we give the right type of money. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sure we'll get Rich's thoughts on this as well. I think 50 million is a fair market value for Marc Guehi right now. We'll get to his form for Palace when we talk to Rich as well, but in terms of what I've seen from him for England so far this season, he's still just as good and still just as effective as a centre back, certainly in a 2, which is what he would play for Newcastle United. His pace, his recovery pace, his ability to block and tackle well, and his ability on the ball is still something that we desperately need. And I think it's an area we haven't strengthened in since Sven Botman. And I think in order to transition out centre backs, Dan Burn, Fabian Schär even, who's 33 now, we have to start thinking ahead. I think it is a position that needs to be brought in for the transition, because Botman's going to need time. He'll be back as a figure, and he's been a big miss, but we need him back 100%, and that might take a little bit of time. Whereas if you bring in Guehi will be able to hit the ground running. And I think, but equally, I think Daz, you made a great point. We go in early with a bid and say that's what the offer is. You've got an opportunity to take it. If they don't, that's fine, because I expect us to have 3 or 4 other options to go for in January if that isn't on the table. So that's kind of where I am with that. But Marc Guehi, regardless of what people say, is still a fantastic centre back, and would be a huge plus for this Newcastle United team. So that's kind of where I am with that, boys. But it's definitely a conversation we can continue, and I'm sure we will. So we'll kind of leave it there for now. However, at this point, we have our guest waiting in the green room, so we're going to welcome him in. And it's not the first time he's come and joined us on this channel, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome back Rich from the Eagle Eyed Football YouTube channel, covering all things Crystal Palace. So let's bring him in and let's get this discussion going for the big game on Saturday.
Welcome, Rich.
Good evening, all. Good evening.
How you doing, man?
How you doing, mate?
About Marc Guehi, actually, very interesting.
Well, do you want to go there first?
Let's talk about it, because you know what? Can I be honest with you? If you had fronted the £65 million, you would have had it. You would have had it. I promise you. Anderson was not the priority to leave, and I think because obviously as the window started dragging on and you kept dragging your heels and not paying the fee that we wanted, but I would like to think we were very upfront with the fee. Then obviously Fulham came in for Anderson. I was like, bang. Granted, I'll be honest with you, I think we need to sell him in January. It sounds mad. It sounds mad, but hear me out.
Tell us why. Come on.
We're not a club that's blessed with money. We're not. And I don't think we will be in the best of positions allowing Guehi to get to the summer. Here's why. Because he would then only cost 30 million. If that. Because when you started going into the last year of your window, it gets a bit techie. You know. Whereas if we sell him in January, I think we could still get 50, potentially. About £50 million. Anything more than that's obviously a bonus. The only reason why I'd say we'll keep him until summer is there's rumours of this potential takeover. So Texter's shares, he's willing to sell his shares. And if he does that, it could give us a bit of a cash injection where maybe we can hold out a little bit. Still lose him in the summer. Like we'll expect to do that. But it wouldn't be as much as a rush. So it's a tough one because obviously we're 19th. And we're going to lose our captain and our starting centre back, and that sounds crazy. But do we risk keeping him and not getting the money and not being able to invest properly in January, or do we stick it out, hope we survive? Which I think we should be all right. We're getting a lot of players back now. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But,
and Rich. Do you think that like yourself and Dee are like a good sample set of the fan base? Dee obviously wants to keep him, or not sell for at least 60 million, and you're saying you think we potentially should sell, cash out now while we can. Do you think this fan base is split in that fashion?
It's definitely split because look, as a player himself, I don't want him going anywhere. I'd love him to sign a new deal, but that's not going to happen, and we can't begrudge him wanting to spread his wings. He's now an starting England centre back, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, he's want to be playing at the highest level, and I can't begrudge him with that. So I'm just looking at it more of a club level. I know my owner, Steve Parish, is tight with money. You know, you look at our January